Alright, hey, Common Core Algebra 2, so we're starting our next chapter now for the second semester. This is chapter 6, which is going to be about powers, and so we're going to describe the difference when we talk about nth roots of the difference between an index and a power, and then we'll talk about rational exponents. Big thing here, when we say rational, what we really mean is we're referring to a fraction. So an exponent that is a fraction and what that does to our number. Okay, so first part, if we have an nth root, meaning something like some number a to the nth root. So this actually, we would read this as the nth root of a, and that's going to equal b. And that equals b when, what that means is that if we had b to the nth power, the same number right there, then we would get a. Okay, so here we call this a power when b is raised to the number. Here, this is called a root. And in fact, a really important term to know, n, is called the index. Okay, so an example of that could be like the third root of 27, and that would actually be equal to 3. Now, just like square roots, sometimes we get irrational numbers, like the square root, and so we don't write here, but there's like an imaginary little 2 right there. The square root of 6 is going to be equal to some irrational number. Okay, now you'll notice here that we have the cube root, and so this has an odd index, and here we have the square root, and that has an even index. Again, even index referring to that number, odd index, the 3. Okay, so when we have an even index, a has to be greater than 0. So a is referring to this number right here. If a is less than 0, then it can't be done. So a has to be greater than or equal to 0, we should say also. Okay, and your answer then is going to be plus and minus b. So we get 2 answers in this case, okay, meaning this value right here would not only be b, it'd be positive or negative b is really how we should answer that. Okay, 2 answers, plus or minus, kind of like our quadratic formula. When we have an odd index, now it doesn't have to be, this number under here doesn't have to be positive or negative. If it is negative, meaning less than 0, then our outcome would be negative. Okay, if it's positive, like in the example we had right there, so if that's positive, then our outcome, our answer, has got to be positive. So that's an example of that. Now if I could just change this and say negative 27, well then the third root of negative 27 wouldn't be that positive 3 anymore. Now it would be negative 3. Okay, so you see if you have an odd index, your answer could be positive or negative, but only one or the other. If it's an even index, 2 things, your number has to be positive or 0 under that root, and then you have 2 answers. Okay, so 2 examples here. We have odd indexes for both of these. If we take the cube root of 216, we're going to get 6. Okay, if we take the fifth root of negative 32, and so you could check this in your calculator, since this number is negative, my answer also has to be negative, and in fact the fifth root of negative 32 is 2. Okay, switching that up, if we use a number like 64, so let's say the square root of 64, if you plug that into your calculator, it's going to tell you it's 8, but you need to remember that there are 2 possible options, because yes, 8 squared means 64, but at the same time, negative 8 squared also means 64, so you need 2 solutions right there. Okay, now the second part is rational exponents. So a big thing, when we talk about rational exponents, that means we are referring to a fraction as an exponent. So you see kind of what that means right here. This is our rational exponent. Okay, in the denominator, so we have an n in the denominator and an m in the numerator. The numerator is going to be your exponent, so that's like the power we saw at the beginning. And the denominator is going to be the radical's index, or remember, you can remember this is some root. So in this case, this is going to be the nth root of a to the mth power. So it would look like this, the nth root of a to the mth power. You could also see it, excuse me, we would not want an m there, we want an n there, the nth root of a, and then the whole thing to the mth power. Okay, so 2 ways we could write that there. The numerator, big part, is your exponent or your power. The denominator is the radical's index. So what this really means, if I simplify this a little bit, is I'm taking the third root of 27, whoops, 20 getting ahead of myself, 27 to the 4th power. Okay, well the third root of 27 is going to give you 3, and then 3 to the 4th power is actually 81. So 27 to the 4 thirds, if we simplify that in a couple steps, is actually equal to 81. Okay, so two things really weren't over. The nth roots, if they are even, your answer is both a positive and negative number, and you have to have a positive number under the root. And if they are odd, then your answer is either even or negative, depending on what the sign is under the root. And then rational exponents. Numerator is your power, and your denominator is your root or the index. See you next time, guys.